Start. Okay, so hello and thank you for everyone who joined today's webinar. We're going to talk about compulsions and how to deal with them. My name is Dr. Sophia Wenzler. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and clinical lead at Helping Minds, the organization that's responsible for the two programs that you probably heard of, Skinpick, that helps you treat skin picking, and TrickStop, that helps you treat hair pulling. There is actually going to be a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so I highly want to encourage you to stay until the end. The presentation is going to be about 40 minutes, and then we have 20 minutes for a Q&A. All right, so let's just jump right into it. First of all, we're going to have to talk about what a compulsion actually is. I don't like to start webinars or seminars or any kind of presentation with a definition, but we really have to do it, but we're going to keep it very brief. Then we're going to talk about what compulsions actually mean in mental health, which psychological disorders they're connected to. And we're going to talk about the cycle of skin pick and hair pulling, because actually a compulsion never happens in a vacuum. There are precursors and things that happen afterwards, and it's a whole cycle. And you can manage your compulsions by intervening at any point in the cycle. So as a fourth point, we're going to talk about how we can break the cycle, how to manage compulsive behaviors. And lastly, we're going to conclude what we've learned. I tried to sprinkle in a lot of practical exercises, so I really want to encourage you to do them with me. And yeah, let's jump right in. So what is a compulsion? Very briefly, I have three definitions. One by the Cambridge Dictionary. It's a very strong feeling of wanting to do something repeatedly that is difficult to control. By Oxford Learners Dictionaries, a strong pressure that makes somebody do something that they do not want to do. And the American Psychological Association defines a compulsion as a type of behavior or a mental act engaged in to reduce anxiety or distress. And now I obviously don't want you to remember all of those definitions. I want you to remember the core of what those definitions actually tell us. They tell us that a compulsion is a behavior or urge that is hard to control, repetitive, unwanted, but leads to some kind of relief. We don't want to do it, but because it leads to some kind of relief, we do it over and over again, although in the long term, it's not good for us. So again, hard to control, repetitive, unwanted, and leads to some kind of relief. All right, now that we got that down, let's look more specifically in what compulsions mean in mental health. And if you look at the definition of compulsions in a kind of broader sense, you'll find some kind of compulsive behavior in almost every psychological condition. But I tried to kind of make sense of it as a clinician and kind of put it in some order for myself. So I thought of this diagram to just kind of give you some explanations for psychological disorders where compulsive behavior actually plays a greater role. And the way I thought of it is by what actually triggers the compulsive behavior, okay? So there are some conditions where the triggers are thoughts, mental images, or ideas. And there are some where it's more a physical feeling, a sensation, something in the body. Now, this graph is completely made up by me. It's not from a textbook. I might have forgotten some very important mental disorder or gotten something wrong, but I think it brings across an idea. So let's look at it more closely. The mental disorder that actually has compulsive in its name would be OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And here we have a classic example of a case where compulsive behavior is triggered by thoughts, by intrusive thoughts, unwanted thoughts. A classic example would be a person with OCD standing next to a balcony, having an intrusive thought of, I might jump off the balcony, and then being really frightened by that thought. And to relieve that distress, they might engage in compulsive behavior such as distancing themselves from the edge, avoiding balconies altogether, or compulsively checking that the door is closed, that leads to the balcony, right? So what leads to the compulsive behavior is the thought or the idea of maybe jumping off. Another disorder that's very close to OCD would be body dysmorphic disorder, BDD. For those of you who have never heard of it, it's basically people who suffer from BDD spend a lot of time worrying about flaws in their appearance, and these flaws are often unnoticeable to others or exaggerated. So this leads to a lot of compulsive behaviors, such as excessive grooming, seeking reassurance, checking behaviors, or comparing themselves to others, constantly worried about this perceived flaw that might, completely distort them. And so in the case of body dysmorphic disorder, the compulsive behavior is triggered by a mental image of themselves or the perception that you have to look a certain way. So it's in your head. Eating disorders are very interesting because some kind of body dysmorphic perception of themselves is, for example, part of anorexia. So here we would have a similar kind of symptom. But if you look, for example, at bulimia, you have two kinds of compulsive behaviors. First of all, people suffering from bulimia might get triggered by some kind of intense negative emotion and then engage in excessive eating, what we call binge eating. They might eat a lot of food in a really short amount of time in order to relieve those emotions, right? So that would be the first compulsive behavior. And then the second part actually would be negative emotions coming up, kind of shame or frustration because they didn't want to eat that much food. And the idea of, oh, maybe I'm going to gain a lot of weight, which is, emotions mixed with some kind of intrusive or negative thought of like, oh, I cannot gain all that weight. And then they engage in another compulsive behavior, which is called purging behavior, things like vomiting, excessive exercise, or laxatives in order to deal with that. So we have emotions as mostly, as a trigger for the first compulsive behavior, which is the binge eating. And then emotions mixed in with, fear-evoking thoughts that lead to the purging behavior, which is also compulsive. And then we're getting to our most important topic here, body-focused repetitive behaviors, which is kind of the umbrella term for skin picking, hair pulling, and other related behaviors. And here we really have a bunch of different possible triggers that involve emotions, thoughts, and physical sensations. So it's really right in the middle. Those might include anxiety, tension, or discomfort. Some people suffering from trichotillomania experience a physical sensation or discomfort in the scalp or other areas where hair is pulled. Boredom, perceived imperfections, sensory factors, for example, the texture or feel of the hair, as well as its appearance, can serve as triggers, and habit. So it's right there in the middle, and we're going to talk about it more in depth soon. But if we look at the other side of the spectrum, we see, for example, addiction. Addiction, in most cases, has physical withdrawal symptoms. If I don't drink, my body will signal me that I have to drink because otherwise I feel very bad. So that would be, my body kind of giving me signals to engage in the compulsive behavior. And then very interesting, and lastly, we have tic disorders. Tics are sudden involuntary vocalizations or contractions of a small group of muscles that is recurrent or non-rhythmic. So it might be something like blinking or more complex movements or even vocalizations or even sentences or curses. And those are obviously people who suffer from tic disorder have more tics when they're stressed or have negative emotions. But the immediate trigger of the tic is kind of a feeling that builds up inside, a physical feeling that we call the premonitory urge. And this premonitory urge is purely physical. It's for people who don't have tic disorder, it's sometimes described as the feeling before a sneeze, where you just like it builds up inside you and you just have to do it. And then you feel like this relief after the sneeze. So that would be an example for, physical triggers for compulsive behavior. And you see there's really a wide variety if we take this kind of definition. And that was to kind of, give you an overview of how common and multifaceted compulsive behaviors can be before we dive into our topic for today, which is compulsions and body-focused repetitive behaviors. And when we look at that, we have to remember what I said before. Compulsions don't happen in a vacuum. So if we look at the cycle of a compulsion, we have a trigger. We talked about how many triggers there actually are. Then we have some sense of urgency or tension or discomfort building up. Then we engage in the repetitive compulsive behavior, feel short-term relief, but might feel negative emotions in the long run, such as shame, frustration, guilt, that make the cycle more likely to repeat itself. And that makes it more complex, but also gives us more options to intervene. We're going to talk about that later. For now, I just want to give you one real-life example, not one possible example of how we can fill this theoretical cycle with details. So let's say we have boredom-related skin picking. Let's say a person has to go on a long car ride. And some time during this car ride, they might feel bored. And that boredom, if it's someone who suffers from skin picking disorder, might be a trigger for them to pick their skin. They might feel this urgency and tension then, and the desire to pass the time and alleviate the boredom. Maybe they're even going to feel some tickling in the areas where they usually pick their skin. And then they might engage in the skin picking, feel some kind of relief or gratification for the time being. But then later, when they look at their skin or reflect on what they did, they might feel bad in some kind of way, frustrated, angry at themselves, ashamed, guilty. And then this whole cycle might repeat itself. So that's that. But it's very important to understand that in order to understand what we can do. So how do we break the cycle? Oopsie, am I going in the right direction? Yeah. So in order to break the cycle, first of all, we have to be aware of the cycle, right? That's the first step. It's not even related to any specific component of the cycle. We have to create awareness. Think about all the things you do in your life that you do automatically. That might be compulsive behaviors, but it also just might be habits that you repeat every day. How conscious are you actually during, when you do them? How conscious when you drive to work, when you brush your teeth? Not very much, right? And the same can be true for skin picking or hair pulling. It can be very automatic. So the first thing you have to do is be aware. There's all kinds of strategies to achieve that. You can journal, you can do self-monitoring. We have a self-monitoring app in our programs. You can use little tricks in order to just pull these behaviors to awareness. So for example, every time you catch yourself picking or pulling, you can transfer a penny from one of your pockets to the next, like pockets in your pants, stuff like that. And that's kind of like the basis. If you aren't aware of the behaviors, you're very unlikely to change them. Once you've created that awareness, we can intervene at any step of the way. And we can even try to reduce the amount of times we get triggered along the way. And any strategy that tries to do that is called stimulus control. Okay, and 5 common ways to exercise stimulus control for a BFRB would be to remove or reduce triggers. For example, if stress is a trigger for you, you could consider stress reduction techniques like deep breathing. If car rides are a trigger, you could consider taking the train. If, for example, tweezers trigger your hair pulling, then you could remove them from your house. You can change your routines. If you get triggered while watching TV, you could try to just, do something else with your hands, like solving a Sudoku or knitting or whatever it is. You could create physical barriers, like wearing gloves, wearing something on your head, wearing something around your hands. Specifically for picking or pulling that involves your mouth, you could use bitter tasting products that you can apply on the areas that you would usually pick or pull, and that can also serve as a deterrent. And then lastly, specifically for skin picking, maintaining a good skincare routine is also important because by reducing the number of blemishes and imperfections, that also reduces the triggers for the picking. So that's how early you can actually start, to kind of try to prevent yourself from picking, at least in some of the cases. But obviously, we cannot eliminate all triggers in our lives. So if you are triggered, then you will feel the sense of urgency or tension. And to kind of deal with that in a different way than we usually do, we can use strategies such as mindfulness or grounding that I'm going to introduce to you. And the whole idea behind that is while we can try to remove triggers, we cannot remove tension or urgency or stress completely from your life. Those are part of life, right? Those aren't the problems. We're always going to have to deal with boredom, intense negative emotions, physical sensations, all of them, right? So that's a common misconception. A lot of times when people come to my private practice, they will say, I suffer from anxiety. Help me with my anxiety. Help me with my stress. Help me with my depression or my depressed mood. But that's not, where we intervene. Those things, negative emotions are part of life. The problem oftentimes is not this feeling, it's the way we cope with it. So for example, if someone comes in that suffers from social anxiety, the social anxiety is not the core problem, or maybe it's the root, but it's not the core problem that we're going to treat. The way people deal with social anxiety is a problem. Not going to parties, not speaking up, being silent when surrounded by others, isolating yourself more and more. Those are the things that really cause trouble in your life. And that's where we want to, kind of intervene. So in BFRBs, obviously, the way we cope with negative emotions or boredom sometimes is the picking, pulling, or sometimes biting. And the key where mindfulness helps us is to interrupt this connection between the negative state and the coping mechanism, okay? Because that connection, the more we do it, becomes stronger and stronger. Literally, the neural pathways in our brain become stronger the more you do it, right? So the first step is not to, you cannot just, destroy, kind of remove every negative emotion or problem in our lives, right? What we first want to do is be aware and then disrupt this cycle or this connection between the negative state and or dysfunctional coping behavior. And here is where mindfulness can really help us. Mindfulness can help us disconnect the uncomfortable feeling from the problematic behavior. It's kind of the opposite of habit or being on autopilot. It's the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something or focusing one's awareness on the present moment. Which sounds vague. Also, probably most of you have heard about mindfulness before, but it really can be such a big key factor. If we manage to create like a break of even a pause of even a few seconds between these two things, we can have more choices of how to cope with the negative emotions or boredom or whatever it is. I do want to say that we had a whole webinar on mindfulness with a practical exercise as well. You can find that on our YouTube channels, Skinpick and Trickstop. But I do want to do a short exercise with you right now. It's called a body scan. And again, I really want to encourage you to participate. Otherwise, the next few minutes are going to be very boring for you. And remember that the way we create, mindfulness is a state, right? We want to be mindful every moment of our lives. But the way we create that is by exercising a couple of times a day, a few times a day. And then eventually, through this practice, we will gain a more mindful state of mind also in between practices. So that doesn't have to be, 1 hour meditations. There are really easy to fit into your, daily routine mindfulness exercises. You will find tons of them online, and you find a lot of apps that help you with that. And we're going to try one short one today. It's called the body scan. Yeah, and let's just try it out. So I want to encourage you to sit comfortably in your chair. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Another one in through your nose. And as you breathe out, close your eyes and start to notice how the body feels right now. Try to notice your feet on the floor. Notice the sensations of your feet touching the floor, the weight, pressure, and heat. Try to notice your legs against the chair. Pressure, pulsing, heaviness or lightness. Notice your back against the chair. Now bring your attention into your stomach area. Take another breath and notice how your stomach expands as you breathe in and contracts as you breathe out. Notice your hands. Are they tense or are they tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft, relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. Then try to notice your whole body present. Take one more deep breath. Be aware of your whole body as best as you can. Take another deep breath, and then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. You notice how sometimes it feels like everything stopped for a second? At least that's how it feels for me sometimes. Most likely also, during this exercise, you probably had moments where your mind was wandering off. That's very, very common. That's very normal. Just remember that every time you notice that and you catch yourself and you bring yourself back to the exercise, that is exactly where you're practicing mindfulness. That's the core, that's the idea, right? So don't be discouraged by that. And remember, the more you practice, the more it's going to become part of your regular state. Yeah, so that's mindfulness. However, sometimes we're too triggered, our emotions are too intense. Situations can get really tough. And then it's hard to, just like focus on your body like this. And we need some more grounding, straightforward, I don't know, straightforward, but other techniques that kind of like bring you back from this moment where you might feel even detached, highly stressed, triggered, or anxious, right? It's grounding techniques are specific techniques that anchor you in the present moment. They're related to mindfulness. We might even call them, a mindfulness practice, but they're a little bit different. They're pretty short, and they're usually connected to your senses. And again, I want us to try one of those out. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. And let's just do it. You don't have to close your eyes. I do want to encourage you to kind of voice the things that you sense during this exercise. And yeah, just try to go along with it and see how it affects you, right? So again, try to sit comfortably in your chair. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And name, again, out loud if you want, 5 things you can see. That could be a screen, something in the background, or hands. 5 things you can see. And I want you to think about 4 things you can feel. Maybe your hands on the table, or your tongue against your teeth. Then I want you to think about 3 things you can hear. One of them is probably my voice. And think about 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. All right. Thanks for everyone who participated. Don't be worried if you don't always find 5 things you can see, although that one's easy, but maybe 3 things you hear. It's not about the number, it's more about like focusing you in the present moment and activating your connection to each one of your senses. And this, if in case you're super relaxed right now and never tried this before, might seem very simple to you, but try it out. Like practice it, and specifically practice it when you're emotionally activated, and see how helpful it can be to just focus you and collect you when you feel you're like all over the place. And with all of those exercises, practice them even when you're doing well, not only when you're triggered, right? Because the more you practice them, the easier it's going to be for you to access those exercises when, the things are happening, when you're triggered, when you feel unwell. Also, I forgot to mention in the beginning, we're going to have a Q&A section at the end, right? This presentation is going to be 40 minutes, but at the end we have 20 minutes for questions and answers. So please stick around if you're still here. In any case, please stick around. All right, so that was grounding. Now, if we manage to actually, feel the urgency or tension, but don't immediately engage in the repetitive compulsive behavior, we have a choice to do something else, right? If we manage to be mindful enough. And that something else would be habit reversal. So habit reversal training is actually a complete psychological approach. It's the gold standard treatment for BFRBs. And it's what we offer at Helping Minds with our programs of Skinpick and Trickstop. And apart from habit reversal, this training also includes awareness training, self-monitoring, prevention, relapse prevention, all kinds of other elements. So it's quite complex. But the core of it, right, is practicing to engage in a incompatible response, to engage in a behavior that's incompatible with the picking or pulling and more healthy. So in other words, the new behavior blocks the old behavior. Those alternative behaviors could be clenching your hands into fists, sitting on your hands, clasping your hands, pressing your tongue against the roof of your mouth. There's actually a lot of different options. We're going to have a whole webinar of things you could do in order to prevent yourself from picking or pulling. New research also shows that circular motions can be really helpful. For example, to move the tip of your thumb in a circle around the tip of your index finger, or like this, can you see? Cross your arms and move your fingertips in a circle on your forearms. And this sounds simple, don't do that, do something else. But with habit reversal training, you can actually practice it and really, learn to manage your skin picking and hair pulling better. Yeah, so that would be that. However, if sometimes, and that happens, right? You get triggered, you feel the urgency, you do the skin picking or hair pulling, feel the relief, but then afterwards you're like, shit, I did it again. Didn't want to do it. Now I feel bad. I feel maybe ashamed, maybe frustrated, maybe guilty, maybe something else. Then be self-compassionate. Okay? Sometimes we think we have to be hard on ourselves in order to change, but we don't. We have to take responsibility. We have to work hard, but we don't have to be hard on ourselves. We don't have to put ourselves down. And getting rid of compulsive behavior is extremely hard and a long process. If I feel this bad about myself every time I don't manage, to change my behavior, I might reduce my overall motivation to change, right? I might relapse. I might give up and say, this is never going to change. So, and also, these negative emotions might again be compensated with picking and pulling, right? So it also continues the cycle. So specifically, shame and guilt are usually not very helpful emotions. And to deal with those very sticky, very uncomfortable emotions, I want you to practice self-compassion. And before giving you a lengthy definition, I feel like I have so many definitions today. Let's just try it out, okay? Self-compassion. Let's try it out. And I really, like with this one, I want to encourage all of you. Self-compassion, whatever made you visit this webinar, even if you feel like you don't have any psychological problems, it can still benefit you so greatly. So please, please, please try it out. And with this one, again, it works much better if you close your eyes. So take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and close your eyes. And now I want you to think about a moment in your past or present that was difficult for you. Maybe you were picking or pulling, felt bad about it. Maybe you experienced negative emotions. Maybe you were self-critical towards yourself. And once you reconnect to that moment, I want you to make space for those difficult emotions and thoughts. Really experience them in the here and now. And as a first step, I want you to acknowledge that suffering, that difficulty, or that challenge with genuine kindness and caring. Sometimes it's helpful to name the emotions, like I am feeling sad, lonely, angry, ashamed, anxious. You can even tell yourself things like, this is really difficult. This is really painful. This really sucks. In a second step, I want you to remember that this is the most basic and general human experience. Hurt is human. Let's remind ourselves it is normal and natural for humans to have painful thoughts and feelings when life is difficult, when we make mistakes, or when we get rejected. Your pain tells you that you have a heart, that some things really matter to you. So your pain is not a sign of weakness or defectiveness or mental illness. It's a sign you are a living and caring human being. Something you have in common with most people all around the world. And in a third step, I want you to respond to yourself with kindness. Take the power out of all this harsh self-talk and try to develop the skill of kind self-talk. What would you say to a loved one in your situation? Maybe something that conveys, I care about you. I'm here for you. I want to help. Whatever you'd say to another, try saying something similar to yourself. Maybe something in the lines of, everyone makes mistakes. It's okay to be scared. You're allowed to be sad, but you're not alone. Don't be so harsh on yourself. Give yourself a break. Maybe you can comfort yourself physically by putting a hand on your chest or taking some deep breaths or any other movement that makes you feel good and supported. I want you to stay in this moment where you're compassionate towards yourself just for 1 or 2 more breaths. Then slowly come back to the present moment. So that would be a self-compassion exercise. Basically, theoretically, there are 3 steps that we went through. Acknowledging your suffering, normalizing but not minimizing the suffering, and treating yourself with caring kindness, right? So we're not trying to take away the point that maybe, you picked or pulled, although you didn't want it. We just want to respond to it kinder and more compassionately, so you have enough energy to keep on fighting to manage, this very difficult to manage disorder. And, no matter what, our world right now is so difficult sometimes. There are such high standards that most people, set for themselves in terms of like what they're doing, their performance, the way they look, what they're supposed to feel. So I haven't met the person yet that I thought, oh, that person doesn't need to be more self-compassionate. Haven't met them yet. So try to practice that for yourselves. And that's that. We went through the whole cycle. Here are some conclusions. So just remember, a compulsion is a behavior that's unwanted, hard to control, oftentimes repeated, leads to a feeling of relief, but causes problems in the long term. Compulsions in mental health are very, very common in a lot of psychological disorders, such as OCD, eating disorders, addiction, tic disorders, and BFRBs. And they can look differently, and they also can be triggered by different things, such as thoughts, mental images or ideas that are more in your head, emotions, and also physical sensations. To focus solely on the compulsive behavior in terms of like, I can't do this anymore, is not helpful. You have to see it as a cycle, and that gives you all kinds of options and elements where you can intervene. And common techniques to deal with compulsions include creating awareness for your often automatic behavior, stimulus control, where you change your routines, your environment, and your habits in order to reduce the triggers that provoke the picking or pulling. Mindfulness and grounding techniques in order to interrupt the connection between the negative emotion or tension or whatever it is and the automatic behavior. Habit reversal in order to have a different, more effective coping strategy. And then self-compassion for the times when it doesn't work. And generally. All right, that was my presentation. Now we do have some time for questions and answers. So far, I can see none in the Q&A section. I'm going to give you some time to maybe think of some that came up. Do you know of any good fidget toys that work? That's a great question. Thank you so much. Actually, there's a ton of fidget toys that work. Fidget toys, whether they work for you, really varies from person to person. We have a whole article on that on our website, and we're actually not in the next month, but very soon, gonna do a whole webinar on those kinds of things. So I would advise you to wait for that because it can vary. And the key is, to just be open, try out a lot of them, and then stick with one once it works. And also sometimes it helps sometimes you even need to create a chain, right? Maybe sometimes also the picking and pulling behavior can be very complex. So sometimes it helps to even use one to reduce the distress a little bit, and then another one that gives the final kick. So yeah, so check out the article, wait for the webinar, and keep on trying different ones. The fact that, the first few tries didn't work doesn't mean that there isn't a large variety of different options. Okay, more questions. Hello, how to help a 12-year-old? Maybe I should read for it before I read it out loud. Wow, okay, good questions. Hello, how to help a 12-year-old who is a bit resistant to help. She has been in a cycling of holding hair for 3.5 years. We have done therapy and she doesn't seem very responsive. So first of all, it depends which kind of therapy you did, right? For what was it, hair pulling? You need someone who is specialized for hair pulling. So not every kind of therapy helps. The most effective way to treat it is habit reversal training. Now, it is difficult for 12-year-olds to adhere to this kind of training. It's a difficult age altogether, I would say. I work a lot with children. I do want to say before I forget, we have a parent program at TrickStop, one that's specifically designed to give you tools to help, your 12-year-old deal with their pulling behavior and communicate with them in a more effective way. So you could try that out. We have the $100 discount code, so you could try it out for a month and see if it works for you. And other than that, that's an age where you I always say with younger kids, you can bargain with them, incentivize, and build motivation for change or for therapy through those tricks. But if this is a mature 12-year-old, it's going to be harder. She has to create her own motivation to change. So I would think you need a lot of patience. Maybe this is also an age where the more you push, the more resistant she's gonna be. Definitely wouldn't remind her every time she pulls, you have to do therapy, you have to do therapy. Yeah, a lot of patience and trying here and there to maybe just work on the motivation, ask her in certain situations when she maybe when she comes to you herself and says, I'm unhappy, there's bold spots, try to wait for those open windows. I think because what you're describing is that first of all, you have to create the motivation, and the motivation has to come from her. So all you can do is, help her thinking process, see if there's an open window, and then, try shoot some ideas or try to remind her what this means in the long run. Oftentimes for 12-year-olds, it's really hard to think long term. Their prefrontal cortex, the area in their brain that's, responsible for that, isn't fully developed. So sometimes we have to do that. But I would be very careful, wait for the right moments, and also take into account that it might take a little bit of time until she's going to be open to it. But you could definitely try out our parent program, or do parent counseling where you are one-on-one. There's a lot of things you can do, to help your daughter. Just be sure that it's someone who's working with a habit reversal training. Okay. Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Just wanted to thank you for your time. Really helpful information. This is my first webinar. I've been battling Trick for 15 years. I'm so happy it helped. Please keep on visiting our webinars. We also have a lot of them on YouTube, past webinars, years and years of material. You can check out the ones that speak to you and just, get a lot of helpful information. Should resulting physical damage be treated by a physician in conjunction with a mental condition? I'm not a physician. So this is not professional advice. It also probably depends on the physical damage. But if you have, physical damage, if something is infected or bleeding, then of course I would seek medical treatment. Yeah. Another one. That's very nice. Thank you so much. I know it's all different for every person. Okay. Yeah, your answer to my answer, the first answer. Okay. So yeah, happy to help. That the webinar that I was talking about the fidget tools is actually not going to be held by me. It's going to be held by one of our fabulous therapists, Laura Sandner, and she is an expert on all of these different ways of coping with the picking and pulling. So it's going to be great. Okay, last question. We have done CBT, DBT, CBT/DBT, and also how to know if it is a physical or emotional urge or both. So the wording is a little bit confusing here. So DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, is also just like habit reversal training is a version of CBT specifically designed for BFRBs. DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, is a therapy, a kind of CBT that was originally designed for borderline personality disorder. I would say that there are some similarities in between HRT and DBT because a few elements actually overlap. There's a core mindfulness element in DBT, and also there are skills, we call them skills in DBT, that people are supposed to practice when they're in high stress situations. So there's also some kind of habit reversal, because what people with borderline personality disorder usually struggle with is self-harming behavior, but it's different self-harming behavior in borderline personality disorder. So, or I mean, now we know also that self-harming behavior occurs not only with borderline personality disorder, but it's most common there. And so what happens is I get into a state of either, I'm not an expert, but I'm doing my very best here. I get into a state of either very intense emotions or the complete lack of emotions, and then I hurt myself. The most common form would be cutting, right, in order to shut down the emotions or finally feel something. And the thing here is that you do it because you want to feel pain, which I think is different from skin picking and hair pulling. I know it's different from skin picking and hair pulling. So that just to get the definition straight. And how to know if it is a physical or a more emotional urge. You know, when I created the spectrum, obviously it's kind of like an artificial separation, because emotions also have a physical aspect. And it can come it can also co-occur. So I'm not even sure if whether in the moment it's so important to understand whether it's physical or emotional or both. And we have, like, I can wait for another 1 or 2 minutes. You can maybe specify why it's important for you to this distinction. I'm also going to think about it. Okay. This is such an interesting question. I'm trying to reflect on it, and I might be shooting, I might be not hitting the target. But I would say, you always you have a physical component also when we're talking about emotions, but an emotion usually also has some kind of signal for you to do something. For example, if you're anxious, it's your emotions telling you you should retreat, take cover, protect yourself. If you're angry, it's your emotions that tell you, draw a boundary, sometimes even attack someone. That's at least what your emotions tell you. You don't have to do it. Um, um, or when you're ashamed, that's your emotions telling you, oh, you just did something that might be not accepted by society. Make yourself smaller, disappear, correct it. And that's something that's not present when an urge is purely physical. Yeah. If that didn't answer your question, feel free to write me an email and let me just reflect on it a little bit more. In any case, any one of you is invited to write emails with all kinds of questions that come up concerning what we talked about today, and generally our program Skinpick and hair pull, Skinpick and Trick Stop. And those were all the questions. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, was there another question coming up? Trying to understand the root of it. Thank you so much. Yeah. the root, maybe I would go back to my explanation. Emotions, we have emotions evolutionarily because we need them. They always tell us, give us some signal of what we should do in order to kind of improve our chance of survival. So again, anxiety is telling you to, withdraw to be safe. Anger is telling you to, draw a line, attack, and so on. And those have a physical component as well. Whereas a purely physical urge might also tell you is maybe a message purely by your body, such as, okay, we got used to alcohol, give us more alcohol. Or there is some kind of tension building up in your body, relieve it by, engaging in a tick. Those are my last thoughts. I feel like I'm babbling along. Please, if that doesn't answer your question, write me an email. Thank you, everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your day, start into your day, end of your day, wherever you are in the world.